Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Fundraising Today. I think this is our third time sitting down to explore LinkedIn Live. So we're so grateful for everyone who is tuning in today. And our topic is a very timely one, and it is how do you increase your return on your return on investment for your events? We know there's a lot of walks and golf tournaments and events and galas happening right now. So we just wanted to kind of look at the typical process and maybe see where it's a little bit broken and where we can do some ways, find some ways to help nonprofit organizations just get the most out of that investment for the overall health of their organization. So I've got two amazing guests with me today who've got a lot of experience in this space. I'm actually going to turn things over to you, Alicia. And can you kind of just walk us through the typical sort of engagement process for an event, the different types of events, and then let's kind of go from there into where there might be some missed opportunities to engage donors a little bit better to get some more value out of it.
Sure. So it is event season, and we know that they are very taxing on a nonprofit organization. They bring in top line dollars, but they tend to be expensive to run in all varieties of those things, in all ways. So thinking through strategically, in my experience, there's so many different types of events that take place out there. You mentioned a couple of them, Leah. There's golf tournaments, there's galas, there's walks, runs, there's a lot of peer-to-peer kind of events. And I think looking at it globally, whatever the type of event is, and I think a lot of folks have gotten really creative with events in the last couple of years, especially when COVID hit, when a lot of organizations had to pivot and be creative in coming up with sort of different types of events. I think the challenge, and I think the goal in terms of how to make those more fundraisers than friend raisers, is to really get to the root of, let's start with why. Like, why are the people who are attending your event coming? Is it because a friend invited them? Is it because a friend asked them to contribute because they were going and doing a walk? Is it because their company bought a table or bought a foursome and invited a couple of folks out to play? Or maybe it's a foursome for golf and they're bringing their 3 clients to play along with them. So I think getting to the root at the start of looking at your whole event file of who's coming is understand why are they coming in the first place, and then treating them and stewarding them, if you will, and communicating with them around that as the starting point. That's their point of entry. Maybe they're coming just because the event itself is really cool and it's exciting and it's something that the general public wants to be a part of. So understanding that and knowing that should skew how you continue to engage with them going forward. If you use that as the hook, that's the first step in meeting them where they are as a constituent. And then hopefully over the course of a communication strategy that starts at the event itself, but then goes through the event and then hopefully long-term allows you to convert them to become an actual philanthropic supporter of your mission.
I love that.
Dawn, you had I wanted to call out because you have a couple of really interesting client experiences that I thought would be really cool to share.
Yeah. So, obviously me being the data geek, everything for me is like, how can data inform who we are inviting? And so traditionally, we would invite, those individuals that were highly engaged with us. We knew that they had the capacity to give, and we would ask them to, buy the table or whatever the case may be. I worked with one client several years ago at a different company that I worked at, and they had an event. They were an arts program for kids, and they actually had 2 different offices, one in New York City and one in LA. And they did a big event in LA every year. And they came to us and they said, you know what, we're really struggling with raising money at this event. It's a great event. Everybody comes to this event. But we don't raise as much money as we should be raising at this. They invited, tons of different artists, recording artists, and painters, and all of the things that, it was a really well attended event. What we looked at though is okay, well, who are these people that are coming to the event? And when we actually looked at the data on those individuals that were being invited to the event and were actually attending, what we've discovered is that Many of them were not philanthropic. They had high capacity, and obviously they want to rub shoulders with all the other people. They want to be there at the event, but they weren't the right people from a philanthropic standpoint. So when you're thinking about who you should be inviting from an events perspective, you should actually be looking at the data also and saying, making sure these people that we are inviting are the right people to have in the room, because their philanthropy is higher than the normal philanthropy, and obviously capacity might look a little bit more. And those individuals also tend to run in circles with other people who are philanthropic. Their circle of friends, the people that they're going to invite, if I'm philanthropic and have high capacity, probably the people that I'm affiliated with are those same types of people. So by getting the right people in the room, it can be really important. And we actually had a client at Giving DNA recently who had a big event. They would invite all of their major donors. They would invite big sponsors. They would invite volunteers who are really good volunteers for the organization. And so they had this list of about 2,000 people that they invited year over year over year. But what they wanted to do is add a little bit to the list in this year. And so they thought, well, what should we look at when it comes to additional people? And so what we decided with our team and helping them is what we wanted to look for is those individuals who had a high RFM to the organization. So they were giving recently and frequently, maybe their monetary was down, but they were still reaching mid-level to high-level RFM scores. So these were actually current donors. They just had never identified them from an invite. They matched that off of their invite list just to make sure that they weren't the same people. And then they ended up with like 535 people that were new names, that were net new names. They invited the 535 people. They had 9 people that actually gave to the event based on the source codes. Only 1 of them showed up to the event. 8 of them actually gave just because they were invited. So it's just kind of a different way to think about it when you're thinking about invite attendees going forward. If you want to supplement that list, looking at stuff like an RFM to you as an organization, they looked for capacity, a little bit higher capacity on those individuals. And they, like I said, they had some great return. There's some other data points after the event that were even better. But that to me was like, hey, they raised money and people didn't even show up. They were just so excited to be invited.
You didn't even have to buy them chicken. They're cheap date.
Exactly.
And to your point, if you're sending out invitations and you've got kind of a peer-to-peer giving situation going on, whether it's golf event or a gala table, and you have your constituency inviting others, it's a great idea to know in advance. And certainly a tool like Giving DNA could be really helpful because you have the ability to do a little deeper dive in research and know who's in the room and make sure that even if someone is coming just because of the friend of, that you're stewarding that person's experience right from the get-go, how they're welcomed, make sure they have a great experience, and then knowing full well that they have the capacity on the back end, ensuring that their experience is seamless.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think having a plan for how you're going to engage them is just so important because when we think about a traditional acquisition strategy, when it comes to mail or digital, we're always thinking through, okay, what's the welcome experience that I want this new name to have in order to lead them to a, maybe a first gift is the right next step, but a second gift might be the next right step. And with an event attendee, you might have someone who attends the event, but isn't ready to give yet. And so the next experience that they need is a sit down meeting with, an officer or someone at your organization so they can actually ask more questions and learn more things. Mm-hmm. And kind of the more data that you have about them going in, the more you'll be able to kind of anticipate what things you need to have ready to just have to be able to execute on as soon as that event wraps up.
Absolutely. And I think to your point, Leah, I think the stewardship of them as a donor really does start. It starts the minute they show up at that event. And so it sounds obvious, but there's some really basic things that have to happen at the actual event. Like you want it to be a seamless experience in coming in, checking in, registration, checking in for the event. Is it easy to, if you have any kind of opportunity for them to give that evening, whether it be like maybe there's a silent auction or a live auction or a raise your paddle event, how easy is it for that donor prospect at the point of walking in the door to give you their information? Do you have multiple iPads walking around the room where they're swiping cards and it's seamless? Or is there a line at the front of the event where they're swiping every person's card and you're like, you know what, I'll come back later, I don't want to deal with this. So all of that technology that makes the ease of and getting them into your system is so important, because that's the starting point of how they interact with your organization. And then once they're in the room or on the course or whatever the event may be, ensuring that there is a philanthropic thread, if you will. Bring your mission to life while you're there at the event. Don't just make it an amazing gala with a cool band and like everyone danced and had fun and whatever. Make sure that the folks who attend are connected to how their gift is making an impact. It can be something simple like a meaningful video as a part of like opening remarks. It could be a testimonial, a speaker from like who's benefited from your organization. It's a golf tournament, maybe on different holes, you have some other kind of experiential thing that brings your program or brings your organization to life. But being creative and kind of introducing each of those elements allows folks to realize like, well, not only am I having a really fun time and I'm super glad that I came, but this is a really cool program, or I had no idea that this organization serves so many people, or I had no idea that so many people were in need in this area. So I think finding ways to do that creatively. You, of course, can print out a brochure or put an annual report on everyone's seat. That's a passive approach, but bringing your program to life in the actual event is certainly a part of that conversion as well.
And I think sometimes people are afraid to do that, to call out that mission in a way that you know, I mean, the whole point is to share how you're impacting other people's lives or other animals' lives or whatever the case may be. And people are hungry for that. So don't be afraid to share that. Just share it in a way that feels not pushy, but just it's more around, you know, the good work we're doing and not asking for a gift. It's not the time to ask right then. It's the time to inform. And I love those ideas. And then
you can use like the animal thing. Like I was just thinking, like there's so many fun ways you can bring maybe your mission deals with a heavy subject, but so thinking through like, okay, well, we don't want to have everybody in the room and bring them down, but let's say animal welfare is your cause and you're having a golf tournament. Like maybe you should have a different animal out on the holes, like they get to pet the dog or they get to do whatever. Or maybe when they come back in from the cocktail party, there's people walking around with the animals and like, so they kind of see that in action. Maybe you are supporting a food bank or a rescue mission that addresses food insecurity. That's kind of like, that's a sad story, and you don't want to necessarily have people are having this lovely gala experience or they're out doing whatever. So maybe you don't want to point out that there's folks out there who are hungry, but what you could do is have like food stations out on the golf course or different things to sort of reconnect and bring to life like the importance of food and the importance whatever and the importance of nutrition. So you can find the fun in it and events all start with fun ultimately. Like everybody wants to get out there and have fun. Yeah. So how do you make your mission come to life and make it fun and energizing for your constituents?
Yeah. And then the next step in the process, which is the one we love, is how do we convert, right? How do we convert those people who might have showed up at the event because their buddy asked them to come to come play, you know, around a golf with them, or, you know, they gave to the run because I was trying to raise $1,000 and I hit up my Facebook friends, right? And asked them to give, and they gave because, you know, they're friends of mine. They didn't really have a tie to the mission. And really, if we've given them the right experience leading up to this, the next step in the process, in my opinion, is knowing a little bit about each of these individuals to cultivate what that next piece of conversation with that strategy is. And a lot of it has to do with, you know, we just want to convert them from a peer donor to an actual donor to our organization. So how do we engage that individual? And a lot of it has to do with just looking at the data, doing like a wealth screening where you can append what affinities that somebody's interested in. And so, you know, to Alicia's point, you know, you're a food bank. You've done all of these steps at the golf event. They pet puppies. They did all of this stuff. Now I've done a screening and I see, oh, these people are philanthropic, but the causes that they like to support aren't social services causes. So how do I align how I build the rest of my relationship with them? Well, I might see that they support education. So I might tie the loops to, oh, this person who's supporting education, I want to send them out something about how food insecurity in our community directly correlates to education inequity, right? And so now I'm kind of bringing them to why they would be called to give to us in a way that potentially, if I didn't tie that loop around it, they might not give because they would feel like this isn't a philanthropic cause that's important to me. And so what we need to do is align ourselves with their philanthropic call, what they're philanthropically called to give. Don't ask them to come to us. We can't, it's harder for us to change their affinity than for us to wear a little bit of a different affinity that still makes sense.
Absolutely. And I mean, I can think of a dozen plus times that I've given to that, friend who's raising money for their birthday, or the friend who's raising money for whatever on Facebook. And I participated or the kids are doing an activity and I'm like, sure, of course, I'll buy whatever, or I'll buy a ticket, or I'll buy a raffle ticket. Making sure that if you're collecting the data, if you have the information that they've given you, their name, their email address, and obviously like probably a credit card or some form of payment, that's your first step of like, you have them in your data. Now you need to do a couple of things. You need to, first of all, recognize why they're in your data. That audience should be treated as its own specific segment. So your event donors shouldn't just get from that point forward added generically into like all your email blasts. And all of your communications should not necessarily go to them because they're going to feel like you're spamming them. Like you need to be really intentional as how you introduce them into your communication cadence. And I think your first email or your first message to them is obviously a thank you, and recognizing that we really appreciate you came. Here's the great things that your gift is going to do. But then I would say the follow-up to that, if depending on the data that you have, let's say they gave via a peer-to-peer, or maybe they came to your event because their friend bought the table and they attended. If you have that date, like they're in your database, they came and sat at that person's table, reference that person in your thank you. We really appreciate that you came to the event with Dawn. Dawn's been a great supporter of ours for years. We'd love to tell you a little bit more, whatever. Make sure that they know you know who they are. And the more you can kind of create that segmentation for that personal reconnection, the more they're going to feel seen, the more they're going to open the dialogue that maybe they do want to be on your newsletter list. Maybe they do want to have, like, maybe we do get them to the point where we're having a face-to-face meeting and we're having an opportunity to talk to them about how they can support this cause. But don't just dump them into the general file and just start shooting them all the things, because even if they don't unsubscribe, they might not appreciate you overloading an inbox because they feel like I didn't give to you. I don't even know what this is. So making sure that you're treating that as its own audience segment. And then when you move them to what I would consider their first actual gift, it's their second gift to the organization. But when you've converted that second gift, now you know that's when you can get sticky. That's when you start really diving into where do we go with this particular candidate.
Yeah, I love that. So it's about, making sure we're inviting the right people, using data to help us just drive who those individuals are, and then having that strategy at the event to engage them in a way that is a great and fun experience for them, but also teaches them a little bit about our mission. And then having that strategy after that, that's not that, hey, they're in our database, they're just getting everything. Have a kind of a specific strategy for these individuals who attended the event from a peer-to-peer perspective, that they gave you a gift, but it's not the normal gift. It shouldn't be looked at like a normal gift because the call was different, right? The reason for the gift was very different.
Love that. So many things to discuss, but I think it's all we've got time for today. Alicia and Dawn, thank you again for joining us for this thought-provoking conversation, and I can't wait to dig into this topic and go in another direction later down the road. So once again, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.